Hey, e-commerce marketing podcast listener. I wanted to let you know that we have created a 6-month guide to marketing your e-commerce store. You can download this guide by visiting getosi.com/guide or by texting GetOSI to 33444. This guide will show you how to get more traffic, sales, and conversions for your online store. Get the guide right now by visiting getosi.com/guide or by texting GetOSI to 33444. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on the E-commerce Marketing Podcast. I am your host, Arlen Robinson, and today we have a very special guest, Emily Murphy, who is responsible for product marketing at POWR. So that's Power without the E, POWR, which is a San Francisco startup whose mission is to provide customizable, easy to use, and affordable solutions to help small businesses grow online. With over 50 website plugins available that are mobile, responsive, and work on any platform from Shopify to WordPress and more. Power plugins are trusted on over 8 million websites worldwide. Originally from England and working in product marketing for a corporate software company, Emily made the move to the US and to the startup world to help small businesses achieve their goals. Welcome to the podcast, Emily.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, not a problem. Yeah, that's quite a diverse background that you have. Why don't you enlighten before we get started in talking about how e-commerce businesses can benefit from plugins in general. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and how you got started?
Yeah, of course. So I actually started out with a background in languages. So I studied French and Spanish and then went on to do a master's in translation. So it didn't really start out in marketing at all. So my first job was working as a project manager in a translation agency. And from then I moved on to product marketing for the translation software company that you mentioned my background a little in the introduction. So that was all in the UK. Mm-hmm. And that's really where I discovered my passion for marketing. And I'd say that's really fueled by my language background and the studies that I did, because ultimately marketing is a lot about communicating a message in a way that's meaningful and that resonates with your audience.
Sure.
Yeah. And then a little over a year ago, I moved to San Francisco and started managing marketing for Power. Okay,
great. That sounds awesome. And I can imagine that your language background, it can help in your industry because you deal with a lot of messaging. And when you deal with messaging, a lot of people don't really realize you really have to get into the nitty gritty with regards to communicating with your customers and your prospective customers. So there's a lot of fine details that you have to pay attention to where, as being a language expert or language person, you're accustomed to doing that. So I know that helps you out.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So today, of course, we're going to be talking about how e-commerce businesses can benefit from the multitude, if you will, of website plugins that are out there that can really help them out. So what I want to ask you first is really, what are some of the top marketing plugins that e-commerce businesses should be taking advantage of today?
Of course, it depends what your goals are for your business, but for example, if you're looking to increase sales, which I'm sure is one of the goals that any e-commerce business has, I would say using a sense of urgency is an excellent tool. And it can actually, some businesses have reported that it can increase sales by over 300%. So urgency is important because it makes us act more impulsively. So psychological studies have shown that we suspend rational thought and make more emotional decisions when we're under time pressure. Mm-hmm. So this is a great tool for marketers in getting people to take action, on your e-commerce site. So to achieve this in terms of plugins, you could use, for example, a countdown timer. So I'm sure many of the listeners have seen these used on popular e-commerce sites like Macy's, for example. That's one that I always see, or even, when there's a sale on. So there are a lot of different ways of using a countdown timer plugin as well. So you could use it to count down the number of days remaining on a sale, for example, or even just target new visitors to your site and use it to offer a limited time offer that's exclusive to new visitors. or even use it to count down the number of items left in stock to create urgency. So these are popular ways of using a countdown timer. And actually, the countdown timer we have at Power also counts up. So as well as counting down, counting up can be used for social proof, for example. So this is a great marketing tool because essentially it's saying, hey, this many people have already bought this product or downloaded this ebook or whatever it is that you're trying to get your visitors to do.
Right.
So it's another way of using psychology, again, to get people to think, hey, everyone else seems to be buying this. I want it too.
Right,
So,
right. That's the keeping up with the Joneses theory, I guess you could say. That's a little phrase we typically hear. But yeah, you're totally right. I never really thought about the countdown timers working in that way, counting up. But I'm starting to see a lot more of those types of apps and plugins. The reason I really like those countdown timers, a lot of times you mentioned Macy's, they're really very effective because they, unlike some of the pop-ups that will appear across the middle of the screen or in certain areas, these countdown timers are typically, you'll see it as a little bar across the top of the screen that would just stay there. Of course, the end user has the ability to close it out, but it stays there. It's not as intrusive, but if you've got the right messaging, the right colors, it's definitely something that can draw attention to. I've purchased some things from Macy's before, and I have seen that even during the Black Friday, actually, they had I think something similar, and I actually purchased something, and I do remember it caught my eye, and I think that's something, e-commerce businesses can definitely take advantage of. And, one of the things as we're talking about some of these different plugins, what I always talk to my guests about and what I'm usually always told is like, it's just like with anything, it really is going to come down to trial and error. There's certain things that may resonate with your customers as opposed to others. So it's just a matter of you going out there and, and really just trying these things. Now, since the audience that's listening are e-commerce companies, there are some companies that may have some solid developers that are working with them. They may have a development team, but there's others that, just could be, one-man shops or one-woman shops and, are pretty lean on that side. Does a company really need a web developer, in your opinion, to set up and manage a lot of these plugins? Are they too technical, or what's usually required?
No, and actually that's the beauty of plugins. So really, I guess I should mention, if anyone's unfamiliar with what a plugin even is, it basically allows you to add something to your website to give it extra functionality. So, we talked about the countdown timer, but this also applies if you need a contact form, let's say, for your website. You can add it using a plugin. If you wanted to display like your Instagram feed or an RSS feed on your website, you can do it with a plugin. And really, this is possible without the need to hire a web developer. So you mentioned the Power mission in your introduction. So part of that is really to ensure that our plugins are easy to use. And a plugin is easy to customize as well. So you can you need no coding experience whatsoever. You can go into a plugin editor, choose your fonts, customize the text, buttons, colors, sizing, add any images, so that it can really match the design of your website and also your business's brand. And then you can decide where you want to put it on your website. And how this is done does depend on the website builder that you're using. And so all of them work slightly differently. Some of them are drag and drop. Some of them you might need to do copy and pasting. Some it's actually an HTML code. That sounds scary, but it's actually just a copy paste. You copy the code and paste it to where you want it, within the website builder, and then you're good to go.
Okay.
And also at Power, we provide step-by-step tutorials for each platform, so you definitely don't need to know any code to install them. And in terms of managing them, there's definitely no need for a web developer, because the cool thing is actually you can edit them directly from your website. So once you have it installed on the page, there's a little edit button that would only be visible to you, not to your website visitors. And you can just click in directly and edit, change anything, change a color, change the text if you wanted to test a different call to action, let's say. So The plugins in general, and certainly the power plugins, are built to be user-friendly and straightforward. And yeah.
That's really good to hear. I recall early on in the early days of the internet, it was really a whole different game when you were trying to add functionality to your website. Here at OmniStar, we've been around for quite a while, almost 20 years now. And, in the early days, any little tool that you wanted to add to your website could consisted of possibly installing software, on your web server that went in conjunction with your website, setting up a database. I mean, it was a whole project just to get additional tools and functionality. But now the game has totally changed with the rise of the SaaS solutions, the software as a service solutions. All of those days of installing bulky software solutions on web servers are gone. Everything is remotely hosted. So it makes it a lot easier. And that's really good to hear. And it's something that I think will help encourage the e-commerce business owners to really just take advantage of it, because there's so many tools out there that can truly add value. Now, when I read your intro and you mentioned earlier in your response, you talked about a variety of, e-commerce platforms and the variety of builders that are out there. And, what I really wanted to know is, are there certain e-commerce platforms that typically work better, in your opinion, with third-party plugins and apps?
Yeah, so I would say actually these days, many, if not most, e-commerce platforms have built-in app stores. So some of the popular ones include Shopify, Weebly, BigCommerce, and we've also partnered with others that may be less known, such as Bookmark, WebSelf, Lightspeed. I mean, really, it depends how comfortable you feel with setting up a website when choosing your e-commerce platform. So I mentioned before, some e-commerce platforms have drag and drop editors. So then you can simply drag the plugin where you want it on the page and then edit it as appropriate or as you need. Whereas others may require you to copy a little snippet of HTML and paste it appropriate place in their web platform editor.
Right. Yeah, that is the beauty of it. Like you said, I think just about most of the major e-commerce shopping cart platforms have their own internal web store or web market. I mean, you mentioned Shopify, there's Weebly, there's BigCommerce. Even some of the larger players that are fairly new to the game but are making a big impact have their own app stores that I've recently seen, and that includes Wix. Actually, they have their own app store, and Squarespace, I believe, has something similar as well. So, these companies really do realize that what they provide internally may not necessarily meet all the needs of their clients, and opening up their platform to these other developers to be able to sell their app or upgrade through an app store is really a kind of a great invention. I don't know where it initially started, but it's really something that can benefit both sides, not only the shopping cart platforms, but the actual business owners as well that are running the stores. Now, with these apps, there's a lot of concern these days because of, security. Everybody's talking about security, web security and data. There's a big thing, of course, going on now these days with Facebook and their supposed data breach, or I don't know if you call it a breach, but the way that data was handled. So do you think are there really any security issues that a business should be concerned about when installing these third-party plugins? And if so, what are things that they can do to prevent any issues?
Yeah. Well, I would say adding a plugin to your website is kind of like letting someone into your home, right? You want to be sure you trust them before you open the door and let them in. Mm-hmm. So the same applies with plugins. They're excellent tools for adding functionality to your site that doesn't come out of the box, so to speak. And if you don't choose your plugin provider wisely, you could come across problems that affect the performance and security of your site. I mean, for example, some unreliable plugins could crash your site or make it difficult to use on a mobile device. And at worst, you mentioned data breaches. I mean, it's possible they could be used to steal information from visitors or make it easier for visitors to steal information from you. So I mean, at Power, we take security very seriously, and we make sure that all our plugins are wrapped in a secure container, which ensures that any critical data won't transfer between your site and the plugin and vice versa. Really, that's one of the things I would say when you're looking at plugins. If you're unsure about the credibility of a plugin provider, look at their website, check their terms of service and their privacy policies, and make sure that everything, that they even have one in the first place, and that you're happy with their own credibility and that you think that they're trustworthy.
Right, for sure. Yeah, you definitely have to do your due diligence. I mean, one thing that you can rest a little bit easier when you're dealing with the apps that are within these major e-commerce vendors platforms like the app stores through Shopify, BigCommerce, because those platforms they do their due diligence. I know because here at OmniStar, OSI affiliate software, we have an app in their app store, and when you get listed, they don't just let any vendor go in there and list their app. So you do have to make sure that your code actually adheres to certain standards. So there's certain things that you really have to do, and so that's one thing where you can rest a little bit easier. I'm not saying that there's never a chance that you can get an app from one of the major e-commerce shopping cart vendors, app stores, and not have an issue, but you're a little less likely just because they do a lot of the due diligence up front to make sure, the companies that are in there have gone through the correct protocols to make sure the data is handled properly and there's not going to be any, security issues. So, yeah, those are things that you can, rest assured on. Now, with all of these plugins and these apps that are out there these days, everybody, of course, listening, the number one goal with most businesses is to constantly increase sales, increase revenue, and increase profitability. Now, tying that to actual plugins, as a final question for you, what is one plugin that you think our listeners can install today and really start seeing an increase in traffic and sales within 24 hours? Or is that even possible?
I'd say it's hard to pick one.
Right.
Especially because if you think about, getting traffic to your site, this goes hand in hand with user engagement. So there are so many different ways of, achieving those goals. I would say a great marketing plugin is a form, right? They're fantastic ways of collecting valuable feedback and information. And I mean, one of the great ways of using a form is to grow your email list. And email marketing is such a valuable tool, and continually growing your list, keeping it clean is very important. So you can use a form, for example, to get newsletter signups. But then, of course, you actually want people to fill out your form. So maybe you have some exclusive offer that you accompany with a countdown timer, or whatever the case may be. There are many different ways of getting your message across and creating that sense of urgency that I mentioned earlier that helps your visitors actually take action. Yeah, and it's making sure that the content on your site is engaging, right?
That's definitely the case. And you mentioned a forum. I think that makes sense. In these days, one of the things that I would also add on to that is offering some type of an incentive, because these days, you can offer the newsletters, sign up, you can get people to try to join your list and try to grow your community. But, we have to understand that people are typically inundated with their email and their spam and the amount of lists that they're on. So they're a little bit more cautious these days to join a list. So if you can really provide them some value in exchange for that email, whether it's maybe monthly discounts, whether it's valuable information about your product line or about your services or just about your niche in general that they can't really get anywhere else, then, they're going to be a little bit more amenable to providing their email and joining. So you want to definitely keep that in mind, that it is an exchange. People these days are not going to usually just give up their email without getting something in return and trying to see where they can get value for it. So I would say you want to definitely keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, forms also are useful for collecting feedback. And if you didn't want to use a form, it's worth considering, enabling comments on your site or like a reviews type tool.
Mm-hmm.
This is a great way of getting feedback, not only on your product and your service and things you can, improve for your whole business, but it also kind of creates a sense of community around your business. And this is what gets people to come back to your site, and engage with other users and really feel like they're kind of part of something bigger. So, yeah.
That's definitely true. And you mentioned reviews. That's also another very, very popular. Those review apps, review plugins are very popular these days because the bottom line is these days people have a lot of options whenever they're purchasing a product or service, and they need that type of social proof, I guess, if you will, that will help them make a decision. And if you've got ratings, the more the better. And that's definitely something that can help out. Yeah. Well, Emily, we definitely appreciate you joining us today on the E-commerce Marketing Podcast. I think your information was invaluable to our users and our listeners. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, how do they do it?
So you can go to our website. It's www.powerpowr.io, or you can find us also on Facebook with Power Plugins, and Twitter, which our handle is also at Power Plugins.
Okay. That sounds great. Well, thanks again for joining us, Emily, and we appreciate all of the advice that you provided.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care. Thank you for listening to the E-commerce Marketing Podcast. To access e-commerce videos and other resources to help your business grow, please visit getosi.com/videos. Subscribe to us on iTunes by searching for E-commerce Marketing Podcast, and please leave a rating and a review. Thanks for listening. See you next time.